Kia ora, ngā mai ki te whare. Welcome to The House, ko Louis Collins aho. When it comes to non-legislative functions, Parliament provides several avenues for MPs to raise and debate issues in the House. One of these is the general debate, held every sitting Wednesday after question time, when the House turns to what's known as miscellaneous business. In practice, this means MPs can speak on whatever is on their minds, within reason. The purpose is to allow discussion on topics that fall outside the more structured parameters of legislative debate. Another option is urgent debates, which can be requested to draw the House's attention to matters of public importance. Whether or not these proceed is at the discretion of the Speaker. This Thursday, however, Parliament set aside an hour for a special debate. These debates allow MPs to discuss issues that may not fit the criteria for an urgent debate, but still warrant focused attention. The Business Committee selects the topics, so there's usually broad agreement on their importance. This week's special debate focused on the energy sector, which has been under pressure from strained production and rising consumer prices. While all parties agree it's a serious issue, some even call it a crisis, they differ on how to fix it. Here's Energy Minister Simon Watts.
Our electricity market is not functioning as efficiently as it should be. New Zealanders need to have greater confidence that the electricity market has strong regulatory and that there is competition sufficient to deliver the affordable prices we all need. This government will not kick the can down the road on these issues. This government is taking action to ensure that power prices come down. We have a clear plan and strong concrete actions already underway, Madam Speaker, to address energy supply risks, unleash renewables in order to bring down prices, give households and businesses more control over their power bills, and importantly, keep our economy growing. To manage New Zealand's dry year problem and bring down power prices, we need reliable sources that can be accessed quickly and on demand. And that is why, Madam Speaker, this government has commenced procurement for an importation terminal for LNG. LNG would LNG would bolster our domestic. Well, it would booster and bolster. It will do both.
Watts emphasises that the government's efforts to expand domestic gas supply, incentivise new generation projects, reform electricity market rules and diversify energy sources, reassuring both Parliament and the public that these measures will address the sector's challenges. Labour's Deborah Russell, however, sought to clarify what those challenges actually are.
What I want to do, however, is to take this debate first back to defining what some of the issues are in the energy space. And when I sat to think about it, I thought, well, here are the three broad areas of concern around energy in New Zealand. The first is around supply, sufficiency and certainty of supply. The second is around pricing, and the third is around climate. We need to make sure our electricity supply, our energy supply is certain. And in particular, we need to think about what's called firming, making sure that our system is robust. So that's a really important thing. But businesses need to know that their supply is secure. Households need to know that their supply is secure. Hospitals need to know that their supply is secure. So supply is very important to us. We have seen businesses closing because of that increase in power prices. We have seen jobs lost because of the increase in power prices. We have seen real hardship in households because of the increase in power prices. So not only do we need abundant power and readily available power, we need it available at a price that our businesses and our households can afford. And I think, so that is the second aspect that we need to think about when we're talking about energy. And the third is climate. The third is climate. We simply must move to renewable power. End of story. There is no choice about it. We must move to increased use of renewables such as wind and solar. We must use to increased use of geothermal power. We must ensure that we have the appropriate batteries, the reserve supply of power. And frankly, the South Island hydro lakes that we use right at the moment for our everyday power, they are nothing but enormous batteries. And perhaps we need to start thinking of them as that, and then having that reliable source of power from the South Island hydro lakes as a battery, and thinking of other renewables as the regular everyday source of power.
Her third point, climate, was unsurprisingly the focus of Green MP Scott Willis, who borrowed one of David Longie's famous lines to criticise the government's push for more gas production.
The future isn't with the fossils. Those who keep on proposing that are doing our country a disservice. You can smell the fumes on their breath as they gaslight us. The evidence is really clear that gas production peaked in 2001 and has been declining since 2014, 4 years before the oil and gas ban. Oil and gas companies have spent billions and come up with nothing. Talk about chasing rainbows. The rapid decline in gas in our energy supply is significant. It demonstrates a lack of strategy or planning for our future, and no one gains from the oil and gas ban fantasy that this government repeats ad nauseum.
For New Zealand First, the most vocal figure on energy has been Resource Minister Shane Jones, known for his drill baby drill line. But during Thursday's debate, it was Andy Foster who took the floor, directing criticism at Labour.
New Zealand once had a competitive advantage in cheap, abundant, renewable energy, but not anymore. There are three things that we need out of energy. We need cost to be affordable, we need reliability, and we need sustainability. And sometimes those things are in conflict, especially at the margin. But I do not believe what I have heard from the opposition. What Labour did, is of those three objectives, they went for the virtue signalling sustainability at huge cost to affordability and security. So every time you pay your electricity bill or your gas bill, and it's higher than it used to be, you can say thank you, Labour, because they contributed to that. Every time a factory closes and people lose their jobs, you can say thank you, Labour, because they contributed to that. That is what their oil and gas ban did. Mr. Speaker, people from within the industry tell me that was the greatest act of economic vandalism that this country has ever seen. And this is from a party that used to be a blue-collar party, that sabotaged Northland, closed down Marsden Point, sabotaged Taranaki, the oil and gas ban, and it's still going.
Like Foster, ex-Simon Court also used his speech to attack the previous government's record.
We've made massive progress by repealing Labor's ban on offshore oil and gas exploration. That cost this country billions of dollars in economic vandalism, and it pushed us to burn more imported coal. The ban told the world that New Zealand's not serious about energy investment. It was a political stunt dressed up as policy, and New Zealanders paid the price, and they know who's to blame.
While both Foster and Court criticised Labour's energy policies, their parties remain divided over the broader question of privatisation versus nationalisation. And while MPs debated what the rules should be for the country's energy system, they also spent time this week debating what the rules should be for themselves. Here's Phil Smith.
Kia ora, ko Phil Smith. New Zealand's parliament is a very seasonal creature. It has daily, weekly and annual patterns, events that have predictable rhythms, and within that shape, known harbingers tend to warn of the impending arrival of the major occasions, like, say, the budget. This week saw two separate heralds of next year's election, and both came on Wednesday. Firstly, there was this very gentle signal.
The House 2 Select Committee reports have been delivered for presentation.
Report of the Business Committee on the recommended sitting program for 2026.
Normally, the arrival of the next year's sitting calendar is only an annual sign, one that foreshadows the current sitting year's end and the promise of another to come. The upcoming sitting calendar tends to be agreed by the House on its final day, but it is pre-agreed by Parliament's cross-party Business Committee, as happened this week. It's the shape of this calendar itself that feels like an election omen. I should note that an election year calendar is like every other year. It ignores the election. It lays out sitting days as if no election was planned. Parliament's inevitable rising and dissolution are not noted on it. They just overwrite it. The 2026 calendar begins just like this year's did, or last year's. give or take the influence of wandering holidays like Easter. But next year's calendar has shunted a few weeks from the last 3 months of the year into the months prior. It feels like a government trying to cram in every week it can before it must rise. And the pattern of those moves suggests that the House might rise a week prior to the end of September, which would place an election a week into November 7 in fact. I'm not promising anything, but if you're running a sweepstake, that sounds like a worthy guess. Anyway, the other herald of the election was much more important. It was this.
Addressing the use of urgency is important both for what happens in the House and confidence in the lawmaking that happens, but also its flow-on effect to committees.
Every 3 years, as Parliament winds down, it begins to think about its rules, or more specifically, which ones to adjust for the next Parliament. The committee that manages this is called the Standing Orders Committee because the rules are called the Standing Orders. On Wednesday evening, they had their very first public hearing for submissions on what could change.
If a minister wants to make amendments, table them in the House 72 hours ahead. The question then becomes, what if the bill is picked up under urgency?
Do you give any thought to nominating more of the subject matter select committees that actually should be chaired by an opposition member?
You actually want to delve deep into the issues and actually get it right, but ding, your 5 minutes is up.
Yeah. The first submitter was the Clerk of the House of Representatives, David Wilson. He heads Parliament's Secretariat, who are both the experts on the rules and those who have to deal daily with their implications and aftermath.
And this is the part that I think is a little bit like having a second chamber. It could conduct examinations of non-controversial legislation involving questioning ministers and officials in lieu of a committee of the whole House stage for those bills.
Probably strengthens my view that since we are unicameral, 3 years is probably not unreasonable.
You're saving the select committee time, you're saving the House time, and if the scope of what was covered was broad enough, you'd also deal with your housekeeping issue that's becoming a problem.
Different ways of consulting the public. I've mentioned one, potentially possibly polling people or that sort of thing. But others have talked about, things like citizens' assemblies or town hall style meetings.
Maybe having some more standards around when select committees can actually return submissions.
The clerk is by no means the only submitter, just the first one. There are many to come, and a lot of really interesting and innovative ideas from organisations, political parties, academics, NGOs and individuals. Reading through them, there are recurring themes. The most dominant is probably reining in the overuse of urgency and of skipping or curtailing the select committee process. But the ideas go far and wide, including the powers of the Speaker, reforms for select committees, their size, chairmanship, rules, and especially managing the avalanche of public submissions.
Yeah, well, 2 parliaments ago there were 95,000 submissions, which we thought was a lot. Now there's over 600,000 in this one.
Yeah.
There are ideas for improving formal scrutiny of government and making sure ministers participate fully in that. And you won't be surprised, suggestions to genuinely integrate tikanga Māori into Parliament's rules and processes. There is a lot to read and to think about in the written submissions and the oral ones yet to come, and this is not the only time we will visit the process or the ideas inherent. I bet you can't wait. You've been listening to The House. It's a whakarongo koe ki te whare. This program is produced with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Mā te wā.